This is the first of a few classes I'm going to be putting on YouTube. You may already know, if you're in Lebanon, that there is a series of peaceful demonstrations by the people in a form of a revolution. Without going into too much of the politics, the revolution is just the people of Lebanon fighting for a better future for themselves, for their kids, and an effort to protect the country's future and economy and all social services, everything that will ensure a better future for us. I moved from the States after being gone for 20 years, and I always had faith in the Lebanese and in Lebanon. And boy, did they not disappoint. That demonstrations have been fantastic. So I've been looking for a way to, as you already know, I suspended all classes and all assignments. Go do what you want to do. I don't want to infringe on your right of free speech by pushing you to come to class. Do what you want to do. But I'm just looking for a way to give you something to listen to while you're in demonstration, or not make you feel like you missed out on something. So I'm going to continue my classes and put them on YouTube. You can listen to them in the demonstration if you want. Watch them if you want a break, or you can listen to it at home. You can even wait until hopefully the revolution wins and we get what we want and everything resumes, and I'll give you the time in class or before class to listen to these and come up to speed. So this will be on YouTube. This is part of the biomedical engineering design course, where we teach design fundamentals. We teach it at the biodesign, the Process of Innovation Medical Technologies book, first edition. This is part of the biomedical engineering minor given by the biomedical engineering program at the American University of Beirut. My name is Masoud Khresh, and if you're looking for me these days, this is where you will find me. This is me and my family at the demonstrations. This is carrying the flag is my daughter Mary Lou, and Ayla is the one we're holding, and my wife Nada. So this is where I am these days. Okay, let's get started. So where did we leave off? I wanted to give you, since we've been not in class for almost a week, because I was also at the Biomedical Engineering Society conference at Philly, presenting our work. We missed one class, so I'll talk to you a little bit about where we are. So we are going through the design process, the identify, invent, and implement, which is a little different from what I showed you in the first week of class, where we talked about the design process, the typical one that starts with empathy. We're following in this course the one set out by the textbook that we selected. Again, I repeat, it's called the Biodesign, the Process of Innovating Medical Technologies, first edition. So right now, if you recall, we talked a lot about disease state fundamentals and existing solutions, and we are now going to talk about stakeholder analysis. Some of this might sound like you've heard it before in class, and you have. I'm reiterating some things and kind of reminding you of where we were, so you can kind of catch up after the break. So I tried the first week to give you a sense of the word stakeholders, because you always hear it when people are talking on design. If you're in a design workshop, or a bunch of people talking about their design or what their design direction or their needs, the word stakeholder will always show up, which is defined as individuals or organizations who stand to gain or lose from the success or failure of a system. This is what a stakeholder is, and you could see this kind of image in the middle of your screen, showing in a sense how it all connects to, it all ends at the end user. A clinical need often begins with patients, their symptoms, and an underlying medical problem, but that is just the tip of the iceberg. Think about the physicians and the nurses involved in the patient's care, meaning that when we talk about a stakeholder, it's not just the patient, right? There are people that recommend the solution, people that use the solution. All of these people are involved in, are considered stakeholders that are involved in design. People that you need to consider when you're thinking about your design. Also, somewhere in the back office, there's a facility manager crunching numbers to decide whether or not to invest in necessary equipment and infrastructure to support the patient's treatment. Someone's also making sure that all these expenses are really leading us to a better outcome for the patient, and at the same time are economically feasible. The hospital can afford them, so they can treat all the patients. And then perhaps 1,000 miles away, there's an insurance company or an insurance administrator or a government official who decides whether or not to pay for the care that has been delivered. And this is really important these days with the rising cost of healthcare. Very few people have access to cheap healthcare. Most people need actually an insurance company to help them pay for it. You can check Bernie Sanders on this, get a little YouTube video about Bernie Sanders and his opinion about healthcare comes to cost. So stakeholder analysis. Let's learn. We need to learn to identify all the influential stakeholders in order for you to really understand your design, and what helps your design succeed is you need to identify all the people that influence, that are all the people that have a stake in your design, and some people that will decide whether it actually makes it to the patient or even gets used. So you need to understand each stakeholder's perception of the medical need initially and anticipate their reaction to a solution concept eventually. So how would they first see it, and whether they're going to be able to really see what you see when it comes to your solution. You need to recognize which stakeholders are in conflict or alignment with one another, and for what reasons. Again, the nurse might want to use some solution to do a procedure. Maybe the patient won't like it. Maybe the physician won't like it. Maybe the insurance company won't like it, or the hospital administrator won't like it. So you need to get a sense of how these different stakeholders interact with each other and with your solution. And also, will be most critical to determine whether the solution to a given need is ultimately adopted, whether we can actually take this on or not, and recognize which stakeholders are the decision makers. So at the end of the day, you need to get a sense of who's going to be the person making the call, and whether your product makes it to a hospital or to the market. So in general, and we showed this the other day, is there is an unmet need that you're trying to meet with your design, right? You have patients, patient families, and other care providers, patient advocacy groups, physicians, professional societies, nurses, facility administrators, public payers, governments, non-governmental organizations. All these actually play a part in dealing with you need to understand how all of these different stakeholders play a part in taking on this device that you're going to make to meet the need. So, stakeholder interests. Once all key stakeholders with an interest in a need have been identified, innovators can next dive into and understanding the barriers that might cause a stakeholder to resist the adoption of a new innovation, as well as the improvements or benefits that may drive their acceptance. And we talked a little bit about some clear example, like the cochlear implant, right? Some people don't want the cochlear implant because some patients don't want the cochlear implant because, the deaf have their own culture, have their own language, and they feel that it might infringe on that or impact their culture. So, which is really a good example of patient not wanting an innovation, right? To them, it might not be. So you got to get a sense of what would drive them to accept something or reject it. Okay, so the cycle of care for end stage. This is an example from your book. So this is the cycle of care for end-stage renal disease. patient develops symptoms due to renal disease. Now the patient visits a primary care physician. Primary care physician orders lab tests and then reviews the lab tests. And the patient, let's say, is referred to a nephrologist, and the patient is again referred to a dialysis clinic. And again, maybe even after that, if the dialysis is not, after dialysis, he might be referred to a transplant center. Patient referred to transplantation, receive the transplantation. You can see it's an example of the cycle. And the only way you can understand how your design actually, where are your stakeholders, is by actually looking at the cycle of care for any disease that you're trying to treat, and you can find out what person impacts what component. Okay, so assignment 2 is up on Moodle. Again, given the current situation, there is no due date. The due dates are suspended. Go do what you want to do. Go do what you want to do. That's as simple as that. I won't push you one way or the other. Okay, so what are we looking for? We're looking with innovators should investigate who diagnoses, who provides the preliminary treatment, who provides the next level treatment if the condition progresses, what parties are involved in the ongoing management of the disease, and the role that patients themselves play in their own care. Who diagnoses, because we want to understand who captures that disease to start with. Third one is who provides the preliminary treatment, who provides the next level treatment if the condition progresses, what parties are involved in the ongoing management of the disease, and the role that patients themselves play in that case. I'll take that and here, let's make it. So that really goes. You can get a better understanding of this through your treatment cycle, which we saw in this, your cycle of care, which we saw in this diagram. Okay, so again, sorry, just kind of skipping slides here. Yeah, so in order to get a sense of, in order to do a complete stakeholder analysis for your design, you really need to get a sense of the financing system, the healthcare financing system. And since I have really no way to look at the Lebanese one, I have no knowledge of it, I'm not sure there's enough data for me to find. We're going to follow the US system here. We're going to take a quick look at the US system, and hopefully that'll be a good sense for you to understand how the US system works. So the way it's broken down to funders, payers, providers, and patients. So patients are the elderly and disabled, poor, elderly and disabled, workers and families, covered and non-covered individuals. It's really how you can break the patient segment down to. So let's look generally at the funders. The funders are taxes, the one that comes from individuals and corporations, employers and employees, and the individuals themselves, right? People that pay for their insurance plans. So for the payers, you have Medicare. In the States, you have Medicare, which is a national health insurance program in the United States. It started in 1966 under Social Security Administration, and it's right now under the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. It provides health insurance for Americans age 65 and older. But there are some cases where they provide health care for younger people with disabilities, as well as people that are really at end-stage renal diseases, and I think also Lou Gehrig's disease. Medicaid, on the other hand, is also it's also in the United States. It's a federal and state program that helps with medical costs for some people with limited income and resources. So Medicaid also offers benefits not normally covered by Medicare. Let's see, per se, For example, nursing home care, personal care. The Healthcare Insurance Association of America describes the Medicaid as a government insurance program for persons of all ages whose income and resources are insufficient to pay for healthcare. Okay, so these are the payers, and then you have the private insurers, which private insurance companies that also handles paying for things, and the providers, people that provide the actual service, such as public healthcare providers and private healthcare providers, physicians, facilities, pharmacies, includes all of that. And to really read this this diagram in a meaningful manner, you have to keep in mind that the large arrow, as you look at the legend here on the top right, the large arrow indicates charges, and the small arrow indicates payments. So, if you example, the individuals are always paying the private insurers, and the private insurers are paying the public and private healthcare providers, and the public and private healthcare providers charge the private insurers as well. Same thing for Medicare and Medicaid, and you can see this across the board. So you get a sense of how the system works. Of course, patients pay the institutions, the public and healthcare providers, and also the public and public healthcare providers charge the patients. It's a good way to know where the money comes from and how the financing system, the healthcare financing system, works. Okay, so the next part of the class is market analysis. Not all needs are created equal. This is it's very important to get a sense of what that is, and we discussed this in the first assignment, where we sent you guys out to look at the market and the needs of the market, and how healthcare operates across different countries, and how that can be different based on several factors. And each one of you, the small couple of pages summary about this. Innovators must recognize that even seemingly important needs cannot be addressed unless there is a compelling, accessible market to support the effort and expense required to bring forward a new solution. This point could be clear to us because we discuss it a lot in class. Unless there's a way to bring something to the market, it's very hard for a solution in medicine to make it to the patient. A solution, and this will become clearer as we go through this class. You'll find there's a lot of hurdles. There's a lot of regulatory hurdles. There are financial hurdles for R&D. There's a lot of marketing hurdles. There are a lot of hurdles to convince the stakeholders. As we were discussing, that this is an important, the need your product meets is important to the patient and all the stakeholders. In today's healthcare environment, the size and growth rate of the target market and the presence and nature of competition in the field all directly affect the attractiveness of the need. So there's a lot of factors that need to push the need to that level. Also, innovators must consider the opportunity to create value in the need area. There must be some room within the market for the team to develop a solution that can deliver the requisite improvements at or below a defined cost threshold in order to capture the attention of the target market and drive adoption. So what does that mean? That means that if you really look at the solutions out there and characterize them well, you'll be able to find a hole or a gap in that market where your need could fit. And that's a very good place to start. If you identify that gap and you find that your device or your solution or your innovation fits in that space, this means that it's viable. It's viable for the market, and you have to consider that solutions in healthcare are not cheap. I mean, I give you a lot of examples most of the times, but a friend of mine who's a professor at AUB took his mom to AUBMC, and her insurance, AUBMC doesn't take it. They were telling him that if she stays for a couple of weeks, the bill could be up to $30,000. So you can see how expensive that is. That's very expensive. Healthcare is not cheap, and your solution needs to really fit in a gap where it can be adopted by the market. So how do you do a market analysis? Step one, landscape the market. So there's dozens or hundreds of needs to evaluate. Innovators cannot realistically perform an in-depth market analysis for each one. Often, it takes a sense to start with the higher level approach focused on the understanding the broad market landscape for each need, and then work towards increasing depth and detail as the list of needs is narrowed down through the iterative need screening process. We'll be getting to the need screening process, but at this point, you're really looking at the high-level needs here. And I'll take a little closer look at this. So a useful way to initiate a market landscape is to start by thinking about the total market for the need area. So let's look at where we are. So we go back to kind of the the disease state fundamentals, where we get a sense of exactly where is the spending going into the disease. And we can go back to existing solutions and also get a sense of, okay, where did we find these solutions? How did we categorize them? We talked about taking existing solutions and categorizing them so we can better understand the need that we have and how to address it. So we use this information to create a map of the market from a solution point of view, conducting additional research as needed to fill in the missing data. So our ability to really look at where the disease is, where's the spending, where's the money going into the disease, and at the same time, how do the existing solutions lay themselves out, is important for us to identify those gaps, the places where we can actually put in some money. For example, in a simple version of solution map, innovators place cost on one axis and effectiveness on the other, and then plot the comparative positions of the major treatment alternatives. So what does that mean? That means that as we start to collect this information, plotting it in a way where we can actually look for a gap is important. In this case, the suggestion is to plot effectiveness on one part and the cost on one side and effectiveness on another side, and see where do all these solutions fit on this map. Let's say there's 6 or 7 solutions to a particular problem. Where do these fit? And we talked about real-time EKG monitoring, right, or EKG monitoring as a few lectures ago, and we talked about the different solutions. Some you can actually carry around, some that are in the doctor's office, some that you can, it's a shirt you can wear. It has electrodes on it. It can be easy for you to do this, and you can start thinking, going back and think, okay, what's cheap and what's expensive about this, right? And what's effective? If you're doing real-time analysis, how effective is a shirt you wear with a little battery that transmits data to your phone, as opposed to having to slap on electrodes and walk around with electrodes? I know this is an extreme example, but it gives you a sense in how the map for solutions can be. So this is another table from your book that talks about market landscapes. So generally, you're looking for some questions to investigate. You're thinking about all the relevant stakeholders or total market. How well are customer needs generally addressed by existing solutions? That's something that you have to keep in mind when we talk about efficacy or effectiveness of a particular solution. If no solutions currently exist, then what is the magnitude or importance of the need when viewed from customer perspective? So let's say there isn't a solution. Let's say there was no EKG monitoring, real-time monitoring system. Well, how important is this for the patient? Or how important is this for the customer to have this? There's a gap. That's a gap you need to understand. If it's really important for the customer to have this particular product, then it actually counts. So how closely aligned are available solutions with the need the innovators are seeking to address? That's exactly the statement. Is if you have a need, and the need is real-time monitoring, EKG monitoring system. The question is, what's out there on the market, and do they really fit the bill, right? We talked about a lot of things, a lot of different solutions, and you start to think, well, if you're trying to innovate a way to monitor the heart in real time, are the stuff out there in the market address that need? And it's really important. That's why we talked initially about structuring the need, because if the need is flawed, everything falls apart. You start building on the need as you go forward. So, okay, of course, size and growth is something that has to be incorporated in. What's the approximate size of the total market for all existing solutions? How much is the market? How much is this taken up from the healthcare market? What's the size of the market by available solutions? Is the market expanding or contracting? Where is the most predominant positive or negative growth occurring? And that really comes from your understanding of the disease and how that ties into the rest of the population. Let's take a look at the quick plot. So this is a high-level market landscape for wound care. You could see your y-axis here is efficacy. Your x-axis is efficacy, and your y-axis is cost. It ranges from low to high for both these axes. You could see the different solutions that are there, right? You can see where growth factors fit in, right? Maybe not so effective, yet they're high on cost, and also where negative pressure dressing fall, right? They're really high in efficacy and really high on cost. So again, not quite what you want. What are you looking for? You're looking really, if you look at anything like this, you're looking at something that's low cost and high efficiency, right? That's what you want. You want to be in where that word opportunity is right here. So this is something that you're looking at. You can see the rest of the solutions. You can see how they fall, and this is a way to look at the market. This is just for wound healing, but it's a good example. Let's take another look at landscape for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. You could see efficacy as well and cost, and you could see the gap here actually falls in high efficacy and low cost. And again, it's another way to look at the market and what exists out there. This example is detailed in your book if you need to go back and look at it. But for the purposes of this discussion, we're just looking at how you would find some sort of way to deal with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, right? How do you look at the solutions and where the gap is? And here's another one. This is for treatment for home devices used to diagnose exacerbation, which is really still part of the obstructive lung disease, and it kind of gives you another way to look at it. Pulse oximeters cover a large range of costs, and their efficiency is low. You have smart inhalers, peak flow meters, and spirometers all spread across, but there is generally a gap. Even this is not necessarily a gap where the cost is really low and the efficacy is high. You're looking at something where it's kind of in the middle between, in the middle of the cost, it's a little high end of efficacy. So that's a good way for us to characterize the market and to kind of find and be convinced that your solution actually fits within the market. So the second step for the market analysis is segmenting the market. It's really rare for a solution to address a need that will meet the requirements of all customers. It should just take one disease and come up with a solution that covers everyone that's involved. The disease can be very, very hard to come by. Patients will have very different disease states, and they'll require different solutions. It is far more likely for a solution to address the needs of a subset of the total population. So maybe some small part of your population can benefit from this, and not the rest of them. So again, this is a component from your book, and he does a good job of laying out what you would look at when you look at market segmentation. So you're looking at the key factors that can be used to divide the total market of all potential customers into distinct segments in which the population shares common needs or perception. So you're trying to actually lay out the customer population where the issues that they have and their need for the solution are overlapping. So what's the size of the market opportunity in each market segment and the potential growth for expansion? That's another look at the size of growth and the competitive dynamics. What are the competitive dynamics in each market segment? The new entrant would face. This is really very, very important. So you know how easy would your design fit How intense is the competition? Are the new companies created, and are they successful? Do you see other examples that can carry an innovation or a need? How well did they do in the rest of the in the market? Oh, also, are companies required in this space? Okay. Next is needs. What are the unique customer needs of each market segment? The willingness to pay. Which stakeholder could recognize the greatest value created by a new solution? What level and type of value would potentially cause the members of the market segment to change their behavior and embrace a new solution? How willing is each market segment to pay for a new solution? And if applicable, what do customers pay for existing solution? And how motivated each segment to adopt new solution? Again, willingness to pay. Would the stakeholder actually take on a solution like this is another issue you have to consider. Well, let's take a look at other ways to segment the market. One approach is to begin with a relatively simple patient-based analysis, and then layer in increasingly complex factors to eventually account for the many different stakeholders and interactions that need to be considered in the assessment of the market. So in general, it's good to look at the population of patients first from a high level, and let's start to dig deep. And let's see if we can actually come up with some examples. So segment the patient based on symptoms and risk factors. To segment patients based on subgroups, based on treatment. Segment patients or treatment subgroups based on providers. Segment patients, treatment providers, subgroup based on payers. You can take an example as people that have take an example of patients that suffer from Parkinson's disease, right? Again. Symptoms. Some people have tremors, right? And these tremors are more violent than others, are more prevalent than others. That's you can if you look at a way to measure there is a way to measure these symptoms and get a sense of how we can divide patients based on that. So based on treatment, some patients their Parkinson's can be managed with drugs. Some can be managed with an implant like the DBS stimulator. So again, you can split them based just on that. Some of them need both the drugs and still take some of the drugs. 3, segment the patient treatment subgroups based on providers, right? So again, some providers might be willing to pay for the drugs and not the implant. Some providers, as another way to segment the patient population. For segment patient treatment or provider subgroups based on payers. Again, some payer groups will be willing to pay for one treatment versus the other. Okay, let's take a quick look at how this plays out. Patients, providers, and payers. And if you can go back to the slide where we discussed. I can pull back to this just for a second so we can take another look at it and remind you what we're talking about. So we can go back to, let's see, where slide was that? Yes, to this slide. When we're talking about stakeholders, and you can get a sense of what we mean by payers and what we mean by providers, right? So providers are also build the patients, are willing to also build the insurance companies, and the payers really include any governmental system or any private insurers. And that gives you a sense of what we're gonna take a look at now in the slides. Okay, so pulling back to the slide you were just at. So there are many attributes that can be used to differentiate between market segments. Innovators should consider a wide range of these factors in their efforts to come up with a meaningful segmentation scheme. So patients, geography, demographic, socioeconomic status, clinical risk factors, attitude towards health and healthcare providers, existing treatments, attitude towards new technologies. So you can basically segment your patient market based on just these basic attributes. Sense of demographic, age, or gender. We talked about the willingness to people to adopt a particular treatment. Can have their age or where they come from or what the culture can really impact whether willing to take on a particular treatment. Also, how willing are they to spend, and how much are they willing to spend on healthcare, or able of doing this on healthcare. Providers also, geography, demographic, socioeconomic focus, specialty, and training. They might not have the right people in the hospitals. Let's say, since we're talking about the DBS electrodes, maybe they don't have a facility to put these devices in. They don't have the right surgeons to put these devices in. So a solution like DBS for Parkinson's might not work for these for these countries. Attitude towards new technology is another one. Attitude towards evidence-based versus experimental medicine is another one as well. For payers, it's more towards as well. Geography plays a part. Self-pay versus insurance pay, national versus regional focus, private versus public insurers, approach to technology, attitude towards medical technology, types of employers, like large, medium, self-employed. It gives you a sense of which employer would have how big the different insurance companies, and expectations regarding profitability and reimbursement rates. Of course, a payer needs to make sense to them, right? If a deep brain stimulator is going to cost $1 million per patient, is this really worth it? Are they really going to be able to afford to give everyone with Parkinson's disease a DBS stimulator, right? As an example, there's a lot of ways to segment the market. Really depends on how you look at your device. So the third thing in market analysis is target markets, right? Which market segments stand to gain the most value from a new solution? So once you segment your markets, you need to look at, okay, where can I add the most value, right? That's really important. If you're building a new DBS stimulator, or people introduced the DBS stimulator, looked at the market and figured out where can this make the most impact, right? Which market segment is likely to create the most value for the customer, the investor, and the innovator, right? You need to help the customer, which is basically your patient, and the investor that's putting money in the company, and yourself, right? These are three things that you're looking to help. So for customers, stakeholders making the purchasing decision, and the word customers here include all your stakeholders. If you look back at the cycle of care, you can remind yourself of what we decided that our stakeholders can be. So the risk to consider: the value of the solution is too small to change behavior. Questions to answer: is the need sufficiently important to the customer? Is the gain sufficient to motivate change in behavior? You want to pull someone from doing something one way, or from treating a disease a certain way to a new way. It needs to see the actual value to them. Your book actually indicates some problems that innovators face. Assume the improvement is sufficient to change behavior. That assumption is a big one, right? You think, and I gave a bit of an extreme example, what the deaf community and their acceptance of the cochlear implant. It's an extreme example, but gives you a sense that even what you think is a fantastic thing in your store, the ability to hear to someone might not be that. They might not want it, might not be relevant to them, and that's their right to do what they want. You also assume that a need equates an opportunity, and that's actually a big one. And you really need to find that gap in the market for an opportunity really to equate, really an opportunity. There might be a need, but there might not be an opportunity for it to make it in the market or to be adapted by anyone. Also, overestimate the role of price plays in purchasing decisions. Understanding where your device falls in the efficacy versus cost is very important, and underestimate the impact of switching costs, unrealistic timeline for adoption. So not getting a sense of how much it's going to cost to move from one solution to the other, right? And how quickly can it be done, right? How long do you think your company will be able to hold on until it convinces someone to switch to their solution? And you see that a lot, right? You can see it in healthcare, you can see it in some other things, right? Many companies sometimes operate at loss until they can spread their product around enough that they start making money. And can you actually do that if you're if you're innovator with a small market? Also, investors, providers of the capital. The risks for them to consider is that the market is too small to justify efforts or investment. It takes too long to develop and commercialize, and competitors might improve their products faster. Questions to answer for them: is the potential market at least 3 to 4 times the cost of developing the solution? This is what someone looks at when you're trying to give you money, right? Someone has to provide you capital. Most innovators don't have, they're not Musk. They don't have hundreds of millions of dollars to dump in a company. They're going to have to get someone's money, and there are really questions to answer. Is it really going to be profitable? Are there ways to mitigate the risk during development by shortening the timeline? And that's really, so what's the risk during development? The risk that you have a lot of issues with R&D of your product, and this happens to everybody. Everyone, you never see there's a lot of issues that come up you don't see early on. Will a new solution be competitive when it reaches the market? Another one, right? Timeline. If it takes you 10 years to make this new DBS simulator, is it really going to be competitive by the time it gets in 10 years? There might have come up with another solution that doesn't involve DBS, right? People are thinking today of using focused ultrasound to treat Parkinson's, and ultrasound is non-invasive. It can be transcranially delivered without actually no surgical implantation or anything. Right now, it uses phased arrays, large arrays that need to focus the ultrasound with MRI somewhere in the brain. But maybe in 10 years, it would be able to be packaged into a product, right? Into a device that someone can maybe wear on their head, and they won't need surgery. It won't involve current stimulation, which is employed by DBS simulators these days. So which can have harmful effect chronically. Current stimulation is not, there are some issues with it, with chemical reactions happen on the surface of the device. And finally, some of the errors: underestimate the competitors' ability to improve products offering over time, and project is unrealistic for market share. It doesn't, what they thought, how much of the market they can take, it's just unrealistic. It won't be good enough. For innovators, providers of labors and intellectual capital, and that's you, right? I'm assuming not assuming, but I'm hoping that I'm assuming none of you guys actually have the capital to start a company now. You'll be more on the innovator side. So the need, you're looking to, again, and you're looking for the risks. The need is too weak to justify time necessary to develop, fund, and introduce a new solution. And that's usually you evaluating your own needs, right? And it's something that you might run into. It's just the need is not strong enough for someone to go through all the R&D, through all the money to get there. And questions that you need to ask yourself, and how long the solution will take to develop, right? If you're looking to make a new innovation and this is your innovation, you need to understand how long it's going to take, right? How long do you think it's going to take to become real? And what is the cost, right? And when and how do innovators tell when they have succeeded or failed in space? Another thing you have to be asking yourself. Some of the problems the common errors is you lose objectivity. You don't know if your product can actually make a difference anymore. You misread the customer or the encouragement to mean market validation, meaning that again. You might think that just because your customer wants it, that it actually fits within the market. And again, comes back to your understanding of the market itself and your market analysis. And also giving up too late or too early, and it seems like it's contradictory.